Yeah, I would defend my ex-husband if my parents mentioned something, that they didn't like, or they started to see things they didn't like. I would always defend him. True intimacy wasn't necessarily physical, but instead, true intimacy was being able to look at your partner and say, "I feel safe with you." And for whatever reason, that struck a chord with me, and I thought, do I feel safe? And I started asking myself these questions, and the answer was no. I did not feel safe. I hadn't felt safe at that point, it was, I think, about 27 years into my marriage.
To the outside world, they are perfect. So to the friends, to people on the outside, they are like
Perfect,
good people,
yeah.
philanthropic. But to their wives or their children or people who are the closest to them, they are like monsters.
Whoever you're with, pay attention to how they make you feel about yourself.
Yes.
Because that's a very important thing to look at. And it can be a huge red flag.
It's sad. Yeah, it's sad. Wow.
It is
I'm
really
so sorry,
sad. To everybody else.
Hello, welcome to Life as You See It podcast with A&A. Welcome to another exciting episode of our podcast where we bring you entertaining, inspiring, relatable topics around faith, love, relationships, social issues, and personal true stories. Welcome. On today's episode, I have a special guest. Her name is Mia Hanks. You're welcome, Mia.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
Yeah, thanks, Mia. So Mia Hanks is a survivor of narcissistic abuse. She recently published her memoir called Bridemade, where she documents the story of her time in an abusive marriage. She's here to share her story of abuse, survival, recovery, and shed more light on the topic of narcissistic personality disorder, coercive control, gaslighting, and other toxic, traits. For the sake of privacy, I'm sure you can see there's, her video isn't on. For the sake of privacy, she will not be on camera, but we can hear her loud and clear. So thank you so much, Mia, for, making our time to be here on our podcast and to share your life story with us. We really, really appreciate it. And just to, move us straight into the podcast, as you feel comfortable, please share with us, tell us more about yourself, your background, your story, all your experiences. We want to learn about it.
Yes, absolutely. A little background. I grew up in the Midwest, and I came from probably a bit of a naive background. I got married when I was really young. And, probably a little bit too naive, but,
How young was it, Mia?
I was 21 when I got married.
21. Okay.
Yeah. And I really didn't know, I hadn't experienced, people with personality disorders. I sort of had a view of the world that everybody was good and that, nobody had bad intentions. So I came into my marriage believing that I had found the person I was supposed to find and everything was great. And I just really didn't know what I had stepped into. And after, a few years of marriage, I really started realizing that things weren't going like they should. But at that point, I just sort of felt stuck. And so I ended up staying in this marriage for basically just under 30 years.
Wow, that's a long time.
It was a long time. Yes, 3 decades, basically. Yeah. So I just sort of, you get into these relationships and it's just not easy to get out. It's not. And so I think a lot of women, especially that are victims of narcissistic abuse, they typically end for 20, 30 years. It's just not it's not easy to find a path out.
Right. Okay. So Mia, I wanted to go deeper into the circumstances surrounding your husband, how you met, when you met him at 21, how long did you date him for? During the early stage of your relationship, did you detect any red flags or anything that made you, concerned?
Yeah. So I met him a couple of years, probably around 19 or so, when I was 19. As far as red flags, I mean, at the time I didn't realize they were red flags, but I look
Mhm.
back now, and most definitely. Um, Narcissists typically begin a relationship with something called love bombing.
Mm.
So they're on their best behavior. They are kind of this too good to be true great character, this Prince Charming. And these relationships don't start off bad. These people are very conniving, they're very manipulative, and they basically get you hooked before you start to see the mask kind of slip off. So, the beginning of the relationship was pretty normal, although I did notice that, you know, just day to day life, everything had to revolve around him. Everything, it was more important how he felt. It was more important, what his opinions were. He sort of, everything else had to take a back seat to him.
Mm.
So that was a red flag. And he did early on, I was starting to feel, these people don't make you feel good about yourself necessarily. You start to second guess yourself. You start to sort of question your worth. And I think I was doing that early on. I just didn't have enough education about narcissism to really know what was happening.
Hmm. Interesting. And I mean, this was 30 years ago when we didn't have all of the information we have now on
We
this
did
type of
not.
individuals, right? Yeah. So people just, as you know, this is just the way he is, he's this way. Like we just give people, um, give them a pass for bad behavior, back
That's,
then.
yeah,
Mhm.
that's exactly, it just, we didn't have the resources 30 years ago that we have now.
Mhm.
And so, and I think i- in that time, growing up and so forth, you kind of are taught that you get into a marriage, and you don't just walk out, you stick it out, you try to make it work. A few years into my marriage, I had children, and you really, stuck because, you don't want to break up your family. You're taught, don't family, you stay for the sake, you make this work. And so that's kind of where I landed. I was just determined to make it work and see it through. And I just didn't realize how damaging the relationship was.
Was.
And it took a lot of years to
Mhm.
put the pieces together and figure out that, this really isn't okay. I think for a lot of years I kind of lied to myself, and just convinced myself this was normal. This person who's controlling every aspect of my life, this is completely normal, and this is how everyone
Mhm.
lives.
Mhm. Wow. Wow. So Mia, at the beginning, like you mentioned, it started with maybe some love bombing and all that. So how many years or how long into the marriage did the mask begin to slip off? Did he become this, controlling, abusive person?
Pretty early. I mean, within the first year, I was seeing signs and things
Mhm.
that I wasn't necessarily comfortable with. But again, I just, I normalized it. One thing I noticed early on was anytime I would be sick, he would, rather than be compassionate or say, "Hey, how can I, what can I do for you? I know you're not feeling well." His response instead would be to be angry, because it just wasn't serving him. If I was
Mhm.
sick, it was inconvenient to him, and that was kind of a red flag. And I remember
Mhm.
thinking, "Wow, that's strange." Most people would show a little compassion. So I started to notice his lack of empathy very, very early. Soon after I was married, and yeah, it was definitely concerning. But like you said, I just thought, well, this is kind of his personality quirk, and we all have quirks, and I'll just live with it.
Hmm. Interesting. So you called him a covert narcissist. So at what point then did you realize what he was doing to you was wrong? At what point did you realize, wow, this is abuse. This isn't right. I shouldn't be treated this way. And if you don't mind, what specific examples? What were the kind of things he did? Right. I assume it wasn't. I don't
Um,
know if there was physical abuse, as in it was more
yeah,
mental and
no
emotional.
physical. It was just um,
Emotional.
emotional and just psychological, almost to the
Mm.
point of brainwashing. Um, but he would, he was very controlling. Everything had to be about him. Everything was for him. If I spoke, which I rarely did speak up, but if I spoke up about, how he was treating me or making me feel terrible about myself, his response was always to say, "You're too sensitive. There's something wrong with you, and you're the problem." And I really believed it. I really, really believed it for a very long time. But as the years went on, narcissists don't get better; they get worse with age. And as the years progressed through my marriage, I would say each year he got more and more controlling of how I spent every second of my day. If it wasn't something serving him, then he just wouldn't tolerate it. So there was just a level of control. He controlled all the finances. He controlled just everything that I did. He really didn't want me to have friends. Didn't really want me to spend time with my family. He was very jealous. The narcissists tend to be jealous of even their own children. So it was just basically living a life where I'm thinking about 5 steps ahead all the time and how not to trigger him. So it's exhausting,
Yeah.
definitely exhausting.
Yeah. I can imagine, especially with someone you consider, your best friend, your partner, someone that should be, that should have your back, having to like play this dance around
Exactly.
them,
Yeah.
trying to placate them every point in time. Wow,
Yes. All day
that's sad
long.
to hear.
Yes.
Yeah, that's so sad. Very draining too. So what did that do for your, self-esteem, your self-worth, your confidence? How did it affect maybe I know you said he didn't let you see your parents. So did that impact your relationship with your parents, your siblings, or did they keep?
No, I mean, I still saw my parent. I still spent a lot
Mhm.
of time with my parents. It's just that, he didn't like it. He didn't really stop me from doing it. He just, let it be known that he didn't like it. Um, but as far as self-esteem, it did kind of crush my self-esteem. Basically, what happens with a narcissist is you sort of lose your identity.
Mm.
Everything is so focused on them and everything about them that you kind of forget who you are. And that's what happened to me. I just didn't, you don't know who you are. You don't know what you want. You just don't. For me, I basically, I had no goals. I couldn't identify a single goal if anyone had asked me, because it was just all about him. And I learned to, kind of second guess myself and really think that I could not make it on my own without him.
Mm.
I really did feel that I was not capable. So yeah, it really does. You begin gaslighting yourself,
Hmm.
and that's exactly what I did.
Right. Wow, that is so powerful. And I think it's important for people to know when they begin to, sometimes it's deep, like you said, it's covert. So you don't even know when it's happening. But over time, you find out that your relationship with yourself changes. The way you talk to yourself, you begin
Yes,
to gaslight yourself, you begin to doubt yourself. I think if you ever feel that way, right, about yourself when you're with someone, there's something like you should look deep. There's something about that person, right? There's something about the way they communicate with you or talk to you or treat you that makes you turn inward on yourself.
yes,
Right.
yes. I always say, if pay attention to
Mhm.
how whoever you're with, pay attention to how they make you feel about yourself,
Feel,
because
yes.
that's a very important thing to look at, and it can be a huge red flag.
Hmm. That's true. Wow. So what was his, during the course of your marriage, what was his relationship with his family? Um, did his family, did he have a good relationship with them, or did they also know him for who he was, that, they knew he was narcissistic?
They
So,
He had a good relationship with his family, um, but a little more distant than, say, I had with my family.
mm,
They were more they weren't really emotionally available for each other. While they were close, it was a different type of family dynamic than what I was used to.
mm,
Um, but yeah, they and I don't think that they really thought there was anything wrong with him. They just were not the type of people that looked that deep. And so I think, just for public appearances, they just felt like everything was normal, and they just weren't, they weren't people that really looked at things in depth. It was very surface level.
Very surface level. Yeah, I think that's a trap when we just stay at the level of, we don't want to go deep. A lot of issues go unresolved, right? Everything.
Absolutely. Yeah. If everything is just kept at a surface level, nobody, I don't think anyone in his family really gave it a lot of thought, and so, and I think maybe they just didn't want to. Yeah, it was just sort of an emotional void. Right. So yeah, they were close, but not emotionally close.
Emotional, yeah. And I think it's also a new thing as well in this generation, where people are like, in the past, it used to be all about IQ, right? Like, how intelligent are you, right? But right now, there's a lot of discussion on EQ, emotional intelligence. Because beyond being, you also have to be able to connect on an emotionally deeper level, right? Because if you don't, then you hurt other people without even knowing. You bleed on others due to your unresolved issues.
Yeah, I think narcissists in general probably have a very low EQ. They can't see things from other people's perspectives. They just are not self-aware. And so, oftentimes they go undiagnosed because they truly do not believe there's anything wrong with them. And my ex-husband fit that profile exactly. He finds the problem is with everyone else, not with him. He didn't think for a second that there was anything wrong with him. So there's no convincing him, hey, you shouldn't have said that, or you shouldn't have acted that way. In his mind, nope, that's your problem. You perceived it wrong, and there's nothing wrong with me.
Wow, that must be really frustrating when you're trying to, get your point across, and the other person is just very stubborn, to see things out, aside from their point of view. So Mia, I feel like the adults we become, or the type of people we attract in our lives, sometimes has to do with what we saw grow earlier on in our childhood, right? Growing up. So I wanted to, if you don't mind, sharing a bit about your childhood. What kind of family did you come from? Was there love? Was there, what was your family like?
So I had a very idyllic childhood. I came from a great home, and I'm an only child. And, I never had in my past, never witnessed any trauma. And so I think I kind of existed in a little bit of a bubble. I was from a small town, and I just didn't have, I think when I went to college, I didn't have a lot of life experience. I had just kind of lived in this perfect little bubble, so to speak. So I just didn't know, like I say, that there were people out there really that, I thought everyone was good. I really did. I was that naive. And the interesting thing is, a narcissist, they will target only a certain type of person. So if you're someone who has really strong boundaries, and, you really stand up for yourself, and you're a really strong personality, they will turn the other way. They don't want anything to do with you. So I was kind of the perfect target for a narcissist. I came from a background where I was very empathetic. I believed the best in everyone. I just gave everyone the benefit of the doubt. And I was seen as someone who could, be easily guilted, who, and my ex-husband was really looking for that, somebody who was willing to take the blame for everything. And he just saw me as a target, basically. He figured he could mold me into whatever he wanted. And, I seemed very, very empathetic, and I could give him, he could be the victim, and, so I was definitely a target for sure. I had all the traits, and just being that naive, really set me up for this.
Wow, that is interesting. So people with such personality actually handpick their victims. They know who to,
Yes,
Which go
absolutely
for.
they do. Yeah.
Interesting.
Because, somebody with stronger boundaries, or just maybe just somebody who is a little more resourceful, they would work with the narcissist behavior. They would be like, "Nope, I'm out of here."
Yeah.
But, somebody like me when I was 19, 20 years old, I'm like, "Well, let's,"
Yeah.
I'm, willing to give him the benefit of the doubt.
No,
So yeah,
yeah.
they're good qualities to have, but in my case, it kind of worked against me.
Right. Wow. Because I'll think, wow, someone with empathy, with kindness, that is what the world needs. We all need people like that. So
Yeah, it is kind of funny
horrible.
how that works, but then
Yeah.
it also sets you up for toxic
Or
relationships if you're not careful. And I just
right.
didn't have the education about toxic relationships to know any better.
Not any better. So what would you say that experience has done for you? And I don't want to probe deep if you don't want to talk about it. I don't know how long you've been divorced, but in your subsequent relationships after your marriage, has your experience from the abusive relationship, did that help you, choose better partner, or just be aware of some red flags
Yeah.
on meeting a new person?
So I've only been divorced for a year. My divorce
Okay.
took a very long time, the conflict divorce.
Mm.
Through the whole process, I tend to be, a lot more skeptical. And
Mm.
I feel like I'm a little more educated on these different types of like toxic
So,
behavior. So
yeah.
I have, I tend to not trust people very much.
Mhm. Mhm.
I'm always looking to see what people's motives are. So it's definitely made me more cautious, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, but also made me, I trust very many people. And the other thing that's been kind of what I'm going through now, which is uncharted territory, is the narcissist. Typically, when you leave, they conduct what is called a smear campaign. So
Mm.
they have to save face. They have to protect their image at all cost, and
Mhm.
they will basically everybody that they're going to go to those. They're going to whatever they have to say to make sure their image is finished. So that's been interesting. You realize people that you thought were your are really not your friends. They
Mhm.
all end up siding with, in my case, his husband. They all his sob story, whatever.
Mhm.
Everybody is, oh yeah, he's, this is horrible.
Yeah.
So that
So
makes
he
me less
manipulates
trusting
them
of people.
basically.
Yeah, for sure, less
Mm.
trusting.
It's trusting. Wow. Hmm.
Yeah, everybody. I would say every mutual friend that we had together as a
Mhm.
couple, yeah, they're all pretty much, him. So that's been interesting to watch for sure.
Mhm. And from what you're saying, right? And I think I read a bit about like people with this personality disorder, right? To the outside world, they are perfect. So to the friends, to people on the outside, they are like good
Perfect.
people,
Yes.
philanthropic.
Mhm.
But to their wives or their children or people who are the closest to them, they're like monsters, right? So sometimes, like, well, it's sad.
Exactly. So
Yeah,
nobody
well,
believes you is what
nobody
happens.
believes exactly. It's sad. Yeah, it's sad.
It
Wow.
is
I'm so
really
sorry,
sad.
man.
To everybody else, everybody
Mhm.
thinks that they portray themselves as kind of a victim in a
Mm.
situation like this, but they're very humble, they're very kind, full of empathy, but they're really not. It's a mask that they're
It's a
wearing,
mess.
and so that becomes a problem when
Mhm.
you decide to leave a narcissist. Trying to find a support system, because all of these people out there think that he's fantastic. So
Mm.
when you try to say, well, actually, he's abusive, no one believes you.
Yeah.
So it really makes it difficult. And I think there are probably a lot of women in these relationships that end up not getting away from their abusers because they don't have a support system. No one believes them.
Yeah. And I think the fact that no one believes them also gaslights them more. It makes them feel like, wait, why is no one seeing what I'm seeing, right? It kind of
Yes.
reinforces that, or yeah, it's terrible. So, Mia, can you share more about narcissistic personality disorder, coercive control, gaslighting? I think it's a word we've heard so many in this decade, like it's just thrown all around.
It,
Can you
yeah,
share more
you
a
hear
bit
it
more?
everywhere. Yeah.
Mhm.
So, basically, if you start to question the narcissist behavior or their treatment of you, they spin it to where it instead of them being the problem, you're the problem. So it's always, they'll say things like, well, you're too sensitive, or you misinterpreted that, or they'll even go as far as to say, you remembered that wrong. So if I would bring up something, oftentimes my ex-husband would say, well, that's not how it happened. There's something wrong with your memory. And over time you start to wonder, well,
Mm.
maybe, and then a lot of people will basically start to think that maybe they're losing their mind. Maybe they're going crazy. And that's basically the essence of gaslighting. And then you start to gaslight yourself, and say, well, I guess I didn't remember that right. I guess I overreacted to that situation. When in fact you didn't, but they condition you to think like
Mm.
that. So it's really a form of brainwashing. Yeah, I would defend my ex-husband if my parents mentioned something, that they
Mm.
didn't like, or they started to see things they didn't like. I would always defend him and say, well,
Mm.
he has a stressful job. He's under a lot of stress. Just, it's okay. And yeah, I would defend him. It was basically almost a form of Stockholm syndrome. If you've heard of Stockholm
Mm.
syndrome, but they
Yes.
call it bonding. So
Mm.
yeah, trauma bonding, it all goes hand in hand with living with a narcissist.
It's interesting how, like, a lot of women, a lot of men as well, because it's both ways, right?
Both
Um,
ways, absolutely, yes.
go through some of these, in their relationships or marriages, and don't even know what is happening. So, Mia, when did you find out? So, in the course of the 30 years, when was the year? When did you say, you know what, this is wrong, this is abuse, I would not tolerate this anymore? And then started working your way out, or just started confirming your own suspicion, validating your own feelings?
Yeah, it was interesting. The whole kind of revelation that I was living in an abusive relationship basically came after I was on social media one evening, just reading
Mm.
random posts. I think I was on Instagram, and I ran across a post, and I don't remember it exactly, but it had something to do with about true intimacy, and it said something to the effect true intimacy wasn't necessarily physical, but instead, true intimacy was being able to look at your partner and say, I feel safe with you. And for whatever reason,
Mm.
that struck a chord with me. And I thought, do I feel safe? And I started asking myself these questions. And the answer was no. I did not feel safe. I hadn't felt safe for, at that point, it was, I think, about 27 years into my marriage. And I really started taking a hard look at, well, why don't I feel safe? And from there, I started just doing some research. I started Googling terms like toxic relationships. And, I took a lot of online quizzes, things like, am I being abused? And I just started reading more. And everything I found was, it all pointed to narcissism. And when I found covert narcissism, I had it was like bingo. I knew that I had found what was happening. It was my ex-husband was a textbook case of a covert narcissist. He literally checked every box. So yeah, it really just took a random quote that I happened to read at the right time to send me on this journey of trying to figure out what was happening.
Wow. And when you got to that realization, what did it do for you, and how did it impact your relationship with him? Did you change? Did you notice any change in you? Or did you just keep, like, business as usual, but inside you knew, hey, I figured you out finally? Did you confront him?
I did not actually.
Okay.
No, I started basically just making plans to leave, and I knew
Mm.
it was going to take some planning and some work. Um, and for a time, I thought, well, I wavered back and forth. Maybe I'll try to make it work, or no, maybe and I dealt with a lot of guilt. I felt really bad about leaving. I really did. And I was looking for validation. I found a therapist, and I started seeking therapy, and that really helped. And I kind of needed like people to give me permission. I was looking for somebody to tell me, yeah, it's okay if you leave. So I did go through about a year of just tremendous guilt. But it was a long process. But eventually it all worked out.
Yeah.
And I was able to find life on the other side of abuse. So
Wow, I'm so proud of you, Mia.
thank
And
you.
well done. I mean, it's not easy, haven't spent that long. Some people, I guess, will just, keep going. I mean, people a lot of
They
times
do.
celebrate long marriages, right? Like, oh,
They
they've been married for 50 years, 60 years. That's all we know on the outside, right? We don't know what goes on on the inside. Now, how did your children, where did your children come in all of this? Yeah.
Well, my kids were both basically out of high school
Okay.
at the point that I left. So, I didn't have that. We didn't go to family court. There was no
Okay.
custody issue. And that part was, that was good. But, in retrospect, if I had it all to do again, of course, I would have left, a long time ago. I think my kids would have been better off had I left a long, long time ago. But that didn't happen, and hindsight is 2020. But yeah, I didn't have to deal with custody issues because they were grown at that point. So I guess, like I say, I that part made it a little easier.
Easier. Can you speak more on, you made a statement, you said your kids would have been better off if you led earlier. Was he abusive to them, or
He
what's that?
my reason kind of for saying that is that even though they didn't necessarily witness me being abused, I mean, he was very covert with it.
Yeah.
I think that, my kids did not witness a healthy family dynamic. They didn't get to witness what a healthy marriage looks like. What they saw was what you don't want. And so I think growing up and watching toxic behaviors, it does have an effect on kids. And kids do notice more than we realize.
Yeah, they
They're
sense
more
it. Yeah.
intuitive. So, but it's been interesting, since the divorce and whatnot. I've been able to have a lot of good conversations with my kids about, what not to look for, and how to seek out these red flags and pay attention to red flags. So I feel like I feel somewhat responsible that I need to help them understand these things because, I let them witness basically this toxic marriage, their whole life. So
Yeah.
but both of my kids are great, and they're doing great. And like I say, it has created some really good.
Yeah. Awesome. That's nice. I like that. I like how you prepare them to, because sometimes it's good to be, like you said, empathetic, kind, and, but the Bible, I'm a Christian, and the Bible says somewhere, it says, be gentle as dove, but be wise as a serpent.
That's
So while you're
exactly right.
gentle, yes, also be smart and wise,
Yes,
know what to look out
absolutely.
for. Yeah. So Mia, what are some of the ways young girls, young ladies, young men, can, look out for red flags, especially with covert narcissists? For overt narcissists, we all know that, is it they call them grandiose narcissists?
We all know that.
We all know them,
Yes,
right?
yes.
But covert, they seem like Prince Charming, beautiful, awesome, but how do you suss them out? How do you figure out the red flags, and how do you protect yourself from those?
I would say really pay attention to how that person makes you feel about yourself. Do you feel confident? Do you feel capable? You should feel better about this person should make you feel better about yourself, not worse. So if you're feeling, that your self-esteem is taking a hit, you're feeling like you're dependent on them, that you can't do things without them, those are really red flags. Also, pay attention to the way that they treat other people, and seek out, are they empathetic? Can they really put themselves in somebody else's shoes? And is their empathy authentic? Or is it just kind of a farce? So definitely, yeah, look for empathy and look for how they make you feel about yourself. Those would be the two, I think, easiest things to seek out when you're starting in any relationship.
That's good. Solid advice. Thank you so much, Mia, for that. And so about your book, what inspired you, to write this book? And I know we can never talk enough. I mean, there's a lot of conversation on narcissistic personality disorder, but I feel like it's not enough. Like there needs to be much more, right? Especially coming from someone like you who has had a first-hand experience of it, right? A lot of talk
Yeah.
I see is maybe from psychologists, therapists, people who just are on the other side, right? But with you, why did you decide to write this book? And what do you hope people will get from your story, from your book?
Actually, yeah, what you just said. When I was researching all of this and learning about narcissism, I find were books that were written by therapists, psychologists, and while it was really great information, it was very academic. And what I wanted to find is like some firsthand accounts. What does this look like for somebody else? Does it look like how I was living? And I just couldn't find anything out there that was really told from a firsthand insider point of view. So I decided maybe a memoir might be something that would be helpful to other people if, just to understand what does day-to-day life look like with a narcissist. And so I don't consider myself a writer, but I just basically, my book is made up of short stories, and it's chronological from the time that I met my ex-husband all the way through the divorce. And I just try to show what day-to-day life looks like, from just the small things to the more dramatic things, and then, culminating in the actual divorce. So I hope that it helps raise awareness, and I hope people are able to look at that and say, wow, I know someone who's living just like that. And I just hope they can, and it'll help people to understand what covert narcissism is.
Wow, this is awesome. So did he know, or does he know about, the book? And was there
He
any
he does not. He does
he
not
does
know
not,
about the book.
okay.
um, and we're hoping to keep it that way.
That way,
But
yeah.
yeah, no, he does not
Yeah.
know, and I did
Well,
not use names. So
okay.
yeah.
That's good. I mean, while educating people, right, on, because I like how you said you went chronologically, so details from the little to the biggest things, right, in the book. So I think for anyone who wants to learn more about, this type of people, because now I heard someone say that we all have, and I don't know if it was listening to, I don't know, but we all have some level of narcissism, right?
We do,
Narcissistic
yeah. I
trait
mean, as humans, we all
as
have
humans.
narcissistic traits. We all
Mm-hmm.
do. But narcissistic personality disorder is a completely different thing where it is just woven into
Who they are.
who they are. It is who they are. So, yeah, it's definitely something that needs to be talked about more. There's too many victims out there, and a lot of these victims think they're stuck, and that's the sad thing. They think they're
Mhm.
stuck. They think they can't get out, but there are resources, and you really, you can get out. You're not stuck, and no one needs to live this way.
Right, right. So I'm getting to the end now, but what has been your journey to recovery? How have you come out of this? I don't want to believe you just realized it, snapped out, and has there been a lot of maybe therapy, a lot of what kind of work have you done to bring yourself?
Definitely therapy. Yeah, definitely. I've done a lot of therapy, and I've kind of amassed a small support system. And that's another misconception. People think you have to have this big support system. You really don't. I mean, a couple of people, two or three people, and it could make all the difference. So I have great people around me, who I'm in constant communication with, and just talking helps a lot. But it's hard. It's still, I you occasionally will have flashbacks, and a little, like, almost like a PTSD. But for the most part, it's been fun too, because I'm free, and I'm learning to navigate life myself and make my own decisions, which can be scary. but exciting at the same time. So I think every day you get a little bit stronger, and I'm having to relearn who I am. So that's a journey, and I think I'm still on that journey, and it could take a while, but all in all, it's I'm happier, of course, and I'm physically healthier now. So yeah, it's a good journey. I recommend it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Two more questions. I promise I'm done.
Yeah.
So looking back at your life, what would you say has been your biggest maybe regrets, your biggest lessons learned, and your biggest and something you're most grateful for?
My biggest regret is that I stayed in this marriage for so long, and that I kept my kids in that environment for so long. I do have that's a huge regret. Obviously, I can't change it, but if I had it to do over again, I would have. I've seen these red flags. I wouldn't have ignored the red flags, and I would have left many, many years ago. But the thing I'm most grateful for, definitely my friends and family, my support system, because without those people around me, I wouldn't have been able to get out of this marriage. It's really not something that you can do by yourself. So yeah, that's what I'm most grateful for.
Wow, awesome, well spoken. Thank you so much, Mia, for sharing your story with us. So, finally, what are you working on now? What projects are you working on? And I like the title. So, the book is called Bride and then Made, Made.
Yes. Yes.
So, yeah, quickly, why spell it that way?
Yeah, so it's kind of a play on words. Basically, it's signifying that I was a bride, that I was made in where he wanted to make me or mold me into what he wanted. So I was sort of a bride that was made. A little bit of a play on words. As far as next projects, I don't know. I'm still figuring it all out. I'm enjoying doing podcasting, doing podcast interviews, and getting to share with other people. I'm hoping to find new ways to raise awareness about narcissism and narcissistic abuse.
Yeah, that's awesome. You're doing a great job. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And where can people find you? And where can people find you?
I have a website. It's miajhanks.com. And I'm also on TikTok. I post a lot of content about narcissism. I post most every day, and my TikTok handle is @NPD. That stands for Narcissistic Personality Disorder, NPD and me. So you can find me on TikTok. And then my book is available basically anywhere online that books are sold: Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Target, Walmart. And it's available in paperback and ebook.
Wow. Awesome. I definitely am picking a copy. So Mia, if you can send me all of those details, and I'll be sure to leave it in the description box so that our audience can, go check it out.
Yeah.
Connect with you on TikTok and, get your books and read it and all that. Thank you so much, Mia. I really appreciate your vulnerability and sharing your story with us. The awareness is important. Yeah. Is there anything else you wanted to say? Any last words?
I think the last message I want to leave with listeners is if I read a quote once that stuck with me, and it said, if you find yourself Googling someone's behavior in order to understand it, that's probably the biggest red flag you need. So if you feel like something's not right, it probably isn't right. And don't waste years of your life in a toxic relationship. Do the work, do the research, and find out what's going on. And if you need to leave, realize that you're not stuck. There are resources to help you.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, viewers, listeners, you've heard it all. You've heard it from Mia. There are resources to help you. Just don't stay there. Don't ignore it. Make the move. You deserve much more. Life is better. There's much more to life than what you're experiencing. Well, thank you so much for being with us on this episode. We appreciate your support. Please like, subscribe, comment, share. You can watch us on YouTube and also on all platforms, Spotify, Apple. We're on all of them. Anywhere you get podcasts from. Please keep coming back for more amazing content. We appreciate your support. Thank you so much.